This is Season 2, Episode 29 of the Faith Over Breakfast podcast.
Welcome to Faith Over Breakfast. My name's Eric Deepen from the Village Church, and I'm sitting across from Andy Littleton from Mission Church, and also from the spice you work in your studio.
Yeah, Midtown Artisans.
Midtown Artisans, yeah. Because you get to be from two places.
I can be
our studio
I can be from all kinds of places.
In Midtown Artisans' little space, right?
Yeah.
It's a studio. So it's like, I don't know how you would say that. But anyway, we talked about the church calendar, and we talked about the mundane life.
Yeah.
We tried to talk as slow as possible to keep you, engaged. And
really?
Mundane.
It wasn't that bad.
It was mundane. Anyway, yeah. So I don't know if you have any other comments.
Thanks for joining us. We appreciate you listening.
Well, we could probably cover a lot of these. I mean, I don't know how interested you are in talking about the church calendar. I can talk about it for 10, 15 minutes, and we could be done.
All right. Let's see what happens. Hey, good morning. Good to have you with us. Eric is sitting over here. We're in our short sleeve shirts because it's going to be 95 in Tucson today.
Yes.
What in the world?
There's something definitely wrong. Wrong.
Man, stop it. Anyway, so we're hanging out. Eric has coffee. I don't have anything because I'm going to go get breakfast and coffee out after this.
Oh, so you're hungry. So you're doing podcasts hungry.
I'm hangry.
You are hangry.
Because, you want to talk about the church calendar and just a little window into the pre-conversation here. I'm not sure I don't know if anybody cares. That's where I'm at. And then I'm expressing general, and then you tell me what people care about, really.
Yeah. And
you said it's leadership, and
yes.
And I just groan.
Yeah, you don't want to do a leadership podcast.
I don't want to do a leadership podcast. I don't like leadership podcasts.
To be a leader.
I have listened to some.
Yes, you have.
But
you want to invent it on your own. You want to make it all up as you go. You want to create and
No, that's not it. I actually don't want to create all my own leadership things. I'm fine with getting some principles from somebody else. It's just that's just what every pastor ends up doing. It feels like I feel like the market's flooded with leadership podcasts.
Well,
and
couldn't we be like the anti-leadership podcast? We're a leadership podcast, but we're not a leadership podcast.
No.
Oh, no?
I mean, well, maybe. I don't know. See how I lead?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that. How do you? Yeah, how does Andy lead? It's like, basically, people make suggestions, and you're like, "Well, maybe we'll see how that goes."
Or I say a quick no, and then I think about it, and then I go, "Oh, maybe."
No, maybe.
Yeah, is that?
That's a good leadership principle. The well, maybes and no's of leadership.
The well, maybes and no's of leadership.
There you go.
That's Andy Littleton.
By Andy Littleton.
Well, so what led us into this was, I forgot, and I'm sorry, Eric, I forgot that last week you wanted to talk about the church calendar. So, and this is something that I think I've had one non-pastor friend ever talk to me about the church calendar.
Yeah.
This is something pastors talk about. So I think that's where I'm at, is I'm like, hey, we got some pastors that listen to our podcast, but generally we have some people. So if we're going to talk about this, we got to make this accessible and tell people why they should care. So let's do it.
Well, that's why I want to talk about it.
Good.
Because one thing is that in the demographic I'm not in, the millennials and below, there's an increasing interest in the church calendar.
The trendy thing to do is to be liturgical and follow the church calendar, it's just like baggy pants coming back.
That's what you think, yeah. Except it's like baggy pants that were popular 2,000 years ago and have been popular for a very long time.
Look, we follow a liturgy at our church. Not much of the church calendar,
right?
But yeah.
So let me explain the church calendar, and then say why I think it's important to contemplate and
do that. Remind me to ask you about how you think people coming out of Catholicism feel about it. I'm interested in that.
Yeah.
I had a conversation with a guy the other day that maybe wasn't about the church calendar, but makes me curious. But explain. Eric?
What's the church calendar?
What's the church calendar?
Well, first off, the church calendar, the idea is, pretty simply, that we do live by rhythms no matter what, right? I think most of us, at least in my age group and your age group, live by the calendar of school. First semester, second semester, summer vacation. That is the calendar that we live by. But we're always living by calendars. In fact, the American church calendar is the national holidays. Like the conservative church follows a calendar. It's actually one maybe we shouldn't be following, but it is a calendar.
Yeah, a lot of churches are more likely to celebrate 4th of July than Lent.
Right. The church calendar, though, is a way of centering your life around Jesus and having a calendar that forces you into some rhythms that may be counter to the culture you're in. Mm-hmm. So it starts in November, the end of November, beginning of December with Advent, where we're preparing for Christmas. Mm-hmm. And the church calendar looks at Christmas itself as a feast. So it's 4 weeks before that where you are anticipating the birth of Christ.
Right.
And then you celebrate Christmas, not just Christmas, but it's actually until January 2nd, you are celebrating the birth of Jesus. Mm-hmm. And Christmas Day is supposed to be a big feast and a celebration of his birth. And
I like the feast.
Yeah, feasting is good. That is part of the calendar is feasting, which is a cool thing.
Is there cake built into the calendar?
There should be. Right. So then you have Epiphany, right? And Epiphany means revelation. And so we're talking about Jesus being revealed to us. In particular, he's revealed at the temple. So God-man is being revealed to us. So we have the Epiphany, and that happens all the way up to Ash Wednesday. Mm-hmm. And Ash Wednesday begins Lent. Mm-hmm. And Lent is a time in the calendar. It's like 40 days plus Sundays, again, with celebrations. It's modeled after the 40 years in the desert with the Israelites, the 40 days in the desert with Jesus. As he goes out and battles Satan and really is entering into his ministry. And what you do at Lent is you begin a reflection on what Christ did dying on the cross for your sins. So in some ways you begin to contemplate your own brokenness. You fast. It's a time of fasting. So in a way it's kind of stopping your busyness and forcing you, along with the whole community of God, to say, we're going to contemplate Good Friday, the day that Jesus died. And so you do that, and then that fast is ended on Easter, in which we have this gigantic celebration, which is interesting to me because I grew up in like a very, very Protestant community that didn't celebrate any of this. So Easter, in some ways, though it's kind of a little bit of an exciting day, is not really that dramatic. You're like, Easter. Every Sunday's Easter.
And I grew up in in Pentecostal circles, but there were like Easter plays, animals in the sanctuary.
Oh, yeah.
So not a feast, but a big production.
It is, but then Easter disappears.
Then it's over. Yeah.
Whereas in the calendar, it's another 50 days.
Yeah.
And in fact, what happens in the calendar is that, you fasted in Lent, you celebrate in those 50 days, meaning you add something into your life that will be a celebration of the new life and the new creation that God has brought through Jesus. And so then after that, we have Pentecost. Yeah. Right. So we have when the Holy Spirit is poured out on the world. And so after Pentecost and all of that, you have what they call the ordinary.
Yeah.
The time.
Ordinary time.
Ordinary time, which is the church, the time where discipleship in the liturgical, like Anglican and Catholic and other high church like Lutherans, that's where that happens. That's a time of discipleship. That's how do we go out and now be Jesus to the world? The reason I think the calendar is important and the older I've gotten, the more important it has been to me, is that I've started realizing that being able to be discipled and centered on Christ with a group of people in a particular rhythm is powerful to my own growth in Christ.
And I believe in rhythms, and I'm not. I guess we've adopted it more on the weekly basis, not as much on the yearly basis. Though we do some of these elements. Sure. We do Easter and Good Friday and Christmas and
So here's one of the most powerful things of the calendar is Lent. I mean, it is one of the ones that most people know about. But what most people don't know is that the early church baptized almost exclusively on Easter. And Lent was actually the period in which the people who were going to get baptized were what we would call catechized. They were
Yeah.
trained in the way of Christ. And the church, who had already been baptized, would pray and fast. The fasting was literally for those people.
Yeah.
So when you
That's cool.
fasted, you were then praying for the, what we might call acolytes, the people who were to be baptized,
Yeah.
the initiates of sorts. And so it's a really holy experience, and you get caught up in new life and yes.
I love that. I think my experience with it all was, and some of this was being young and working in the Christian bookstore and stuff, was I met a whole lot of different flavors of Christians. And,
Sure.
And I just didn't get a sense of any of this from the liturgical church folks I interacted with. Like,
Sure.
So you're talking about it. I mean, if it were really practiced in its deepest sense, what it was intended to be, that's interesting to me. But the experience I had was just people are like, oh yeah, it's Ash Wednesday. The church next to my house does drive-through ashings, as I would call it. You can just drive through the loop, and they just hit you with the ash cross, and you head on to work. I don't know that stuff. I just don't.
Yeah, no. I mean, but to me, it's like the Protestant church is full of this.
Yeah.
The Catholic church is full of this. It doesn't. You don't have to have liturgy to do this.
Of course. Yeah.
To have hypocrisy.
No, I know. I'm not. Believe me, I'm not saying that. I'm just reflecting on why have I not been as interested.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I understand that. I mean, for me, and what I see, and here's the thing: the reason I think the church calendar is not just a popular thing. It may be a popular thing now with Protestants, or beginning to be, but I think it's a necessary thing in a culture that is so busy, so crazy, and so caught up in a calendar and in a rhythm that isn't God's calendar and God's rhythm, and where the distinctions have become less and less.
Right.
As to what a follower of Jesus is and what any other person is. Like, the calendar forces you into distinction. And I think there are some good theologians who, when the church invites us to fast, we ought to consider fasting. And I think the church does, through the calendar, invite us into something different. We don't have to buy in 100%, but I certainly think.
But the church is encouraging it.
Yeah.
Who invented, if you would, the church calendar?
Well, certainly.
I mean, you're talking about the early church, but is there a time where it's like, oh, so and so sat down
and you're asking
so and so council or whatever?
Yeah, what? That I don't actually know. I mean, from the research, most of the research I've done is on Lent and how far back, Lent goes.
Were some of these practices there, and then they got formalized with time?
Yeah, everything got formalized by the 6th century.
Sure.
So that's what even when you think about the Apostles' Creed, the Apostles' Creed was kind of founded in its final way in the 6th century, and so that's about when you can.
It was there. It was a tradition before, but it was locked into some kind of document.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm not historically. I'm not. I mean, I just can't speak to that.
Yeah.
More than that.
Do you think that a church could have freedom to build its own calendar, or do you need to use the old one?
I think the church could build its own calendar. There wouldn't be anything wrong with that. I think there's something very special about being connected to the larger church.
I agree with that. I like at our church, one thing we say in our members' meetings is we're not trying to be a new brand of Christianity, which is why we ask you hold the Apostles' Creed, and we're trying to connect the dots back and say we're not reinventing this faith. Even though our church looks different than those did back then, this is the same. So I see the value in that. I'm just wondering if a church were to reflect and go, in our context, I think we need to do more, or this needs to be different. Do you think that's just wrong, or is?
No, I think I think part of, there in anything there's the local, right? And the local, in some ways I imagine like Mission Church is like folk music. Folk music is down at the level of the people, and it expresses the energy and the emotion and the story of the people. but then you can imagine the church calendar and even liturgy itself as sort of classical music or music that has
elitist.
Extended over, decades, and at times takes it takes experts to really do it.
Right.
And it offers something of beauty that doesn't diminish folk art. In fact, folk art is just as powerful. It just is a different, creative experience and process. And so I think the two have to figure out how to marry themselves together.
So Seattle grunge Eric is he's growing a little bit older, starting to, expand his palette, is listening to a little 91.5 and starting to think about the church calendar.
Well, I mean, from the very beginning, I believed in the ancient future church. So, I mean, I think that the two have to be married together. Liturgy's been something powerful in our church from the very beginning.
Yeah. Can Bob Dylan lead worship in the 7th century church is the question.
Yeah, well, and that's a good question. During Bach's time, folk music was actually relatively popular. Yeah. And Bach actually, I think, composed some pieces that people don't really recognize or know about, but that were just for,
They called him MC Bach on the streets.
Yes, MC Bach. I don't know. I mean, even though most of it's all Baroque and big and...
Dude, if it ain't Baroque, don't fix it.
Yeah, wow, you're going for it. Anyway, that's my little pitch. And for my church, we're probably over the next 10 years, I suspect because it's my influence, we'll move that way more and more.
Yeah.
But I will say one more last thing.
Yeah.
Is that I think this whole movement is because of the Anglicans. The Anglicans have begun to push into the Protestant church, from people like Scott McKnight to N.T. Wright, and others who have a very evangelical flavor to them, and they are really good, historians and theologians, and so they've begun to influence the Protestant church in a way that's.
Yeah, I would venture to say that at the least, like, the Protestant church has been so disconnected. I mean, part of what happened after the Reformation, and then with the New World and people coming to America and getting to do any kind of flavor of faith they want is there's something lacking in that. And I think people are longing for something that connects them to other churches. I think people want it to be more real and substantive, but some of these practices are a step in that direction. It seems like here we are, deep into the post-Reformation faith, and we're all starting to go, this whole, like, everybody has their own brand of the faith, even though we say we're united and we hold all the same core tenets thing isn't really enough.
Right.
We need more than that. So I was talking to a guy, I think he had a Catholic background, and he was this is just the other day, neighbor of mine. He kind of caught me. I borrowed a tool from him, and he knew I was a pastor, and I just wanted to talk, and was throwing out, like, why do all the churches celebrate Christmas and Easter? These were pagan holidays and I think this guy, coming from the Catholic background, so I've noticed this, and we have a lot of this in Tucson, especially in the Hispanic world. I've noticed, like, 3 camps. There's the people with the Catholic background that are true to the end.
Mm-hmm.
There's the people from the Catholic background that maybe something's missing, but they generally want to keep, like, the rhythms and stuff like that. And then there's the people from that background who just they're just like, all of that was broken. It was meaningless. It was rote rituals. It wasn't.
Sure.
And they want to be done with that. They want a living faith that doesn't have anything to do with that.
Or no faith at all. They want away.
Or no faith. There's the fourth.
Yeah.
And so this guy was reminding me of that third position of, these rituals and practices that we just adapted from the heathen world or whatever, and stuff that, we don't really, like, I think freedom in Christ meant we don't have to do all that stuff for him,
Right.
So speak to that, how would you encourage him to love the church calendar and return to its practices?
How would I encourage him? Well, I mean, it's kind of the thing of, we always live a life of reaction. right? I mean, and the Protestant movement.
And you're reacting to
right, sure. The
something.
Protestant, we're always reacting.
Yeah.
The Protestant movement is a reaction to the Catholic movement. The Catholic taking Christmas, Easter on those dates is a reaction to the pagan culture itself, and it's a redemptive process. I would say the best way to do it is to move out of it and not do it. Is to find a place where you are connecting with Jesus, and then if Jesus calls you back into the calendar, hopefully that will be a redemptive experience. But I think, that's the beauty of following Jesus in this period of time, is that he actually offers you many different ways of engaging him on the same tenets.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
and I did my encouragement to this guy, because he kind of seemed like he was at this place where he discovered some of those things, and it was in more of a rejection mode. And I only had a minute. we had an active leak at the rental house.
I know.
And I'm like, dude, water's coming out of the pipe, but I kind of said, look, sorry, but really quick, here's my advice. I was like, so we can get really passionate about something that isn't Jesus, so at the end of the day, you can get frustrated with a group of Christians that celebrate what you're perceiving as a pagan holiday, and they've just layered Jesus over it. But the main thing at the end of the day is having a relationship with Jesus and knowing Christ and being in a community of God's people. And so I was like, when you stand before God and if you trust in Jesus, and it turns out we were wrong about celebrating Christmas on this day, and we shouldn't have given, socks full of gifts after all, God isn't going to put you away for that.
right.
He's going to accept you in Christ. So I said, just don't make that the big thing. Make Jesus your big thing, and then have your convictions on this stuff and live by it.
Sure.
But don't divide over it, and don't criticize people over it.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. And I mean, the thing is, the church calendar is following and trying to imitate Jesus, because Jesus was constantly retelling local stories, Israel's story. So Passover becomes communion.
Yeah, he followed and redefined some
Right.
Interestingly, Passover was once a year and communion's once a week.
Right.
And so it didn't all stay exactly the same, right?
He just told it differently, or depending what tradition.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, sometimes communion is once a year, or
Right.
sometimes, right. Yeah, when did the early church, my kind of general understanding, I don't know that I can cite anything, but my general understanding was that the early church met in homes and partook of a meal together regularly. And that the breaking of bread at the least was a regular activity in a home, perhaps really every day.
Right.
And so by him taking that, and that wasn't part of the Passover, it was, okay, yes and no. I don't know that I would be of the camp that would say it doesn't need to be unleavened Passover bread.
No.
Right. And so it was kind of normal. It was taking a thing that was Passover connected, but giving you the opportunity to reflect on it every day when you broke your bread.
Right. And in particular, I mean, there was a particular way they went about it on Sundays.
Okay. Yeah, tell me about that.
Well, I think that, yes, it wasn't a normal meal like we talk about, but from what we can understand historically, there was a process on Sunday morning, because everybody worked on Sunday. It wasn't a special.
Yeah, it wasn't their Sabbath.
So they met early in the morning.
Week.
We know from one particular writing, I think, of a Roman governor, he described they sang some songs in the morning, they broke bread and drank wine, and they went out into their jobs.
Yeah, so they were day drinkers.
Yes.
They were.
Yeah.
No, they had a little wine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, everything had wine in it.
Yeah.
There's lots of bugs.
Yeah. Yeah. And and it was medicinal, and there were all sorts of things, right?
Right.
Yeah, so that it was like an early morning. Yeah, somebody asked me about this. Came up the other day at church. Somebody went like, "Oh, I used to go to church on Saturday, which was really the Sabbath," and then this other guy I was talking to said something about, we're not even practicing the Sabbath, and I said, there's a lot of different views on how that works. And again, I said, and I would just encourage you, to know that you could have any of those views, but if you want to know Christ and trust him and follow, like at the end, if you get up and stand before God someday and he goes, you know what, you were really supposed to rest more on Saturdays actually, and you go, oh no, but you're in Christ, you're going to be accepted by faith. But yeah, talk about when that Lord's Day thing, like it wasn't like a whole day necessarily for them. They probably did practice.
Yeah, it
the
didn't
Sabbath.
really.
The Jewish people did, right?
Yeah, it didn't really happen until Constantine that you would find it
Like the full-on Sunday,
right, where you have space
Yeah.
in culture to provide for that. So no, it was
that wasn't available.
No, it was not available to you. But Paul deals with this in Romans, like in the sense of talking about special days and feast days. Like it's even when it comes to the calendar, it really is at some level what you hold on to in your relationship with Jesus. You know, as to something that connects you there.
Because you could do all those things for all the wrong reasons, right?
Right.
You know, and so we can acknowledge that you could have all these practices and think yourself very righteous for them all, right? Or you can do them because you want to know Christ, and this is a way to do that, and that motive is so important.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think the thing is, no matter what form you use to step into as a community to worship God, as long as it is following in general what Paul lays out in Ephesians to kind of do when you gather together, and singing psalms to one another and offering words of encouragement and praying for each other and having a sober spirit, all those things, you're kind of moving in those directions. Really what you need to be aware of and however you process your communal worship with God is God's presence.
Right.
Are you together attending? And these are to God's presence. Are you looking for it? Are you together repenting of the places you've walked away from it? I'm like, is that the thing? Is Jesus the center of however your process works?
Right.
Because then he will show up, because it says where 2 or 3 are gathered, like he's there. So you're just, as a community, as you're saying, okay, you're here. So how do we see you and join you in this?
Yeah.
I don't know if it matters. I mean, how you do it. I mean, it's cool that if you connect to an ancient way. It's cool if you're being creative and looking at new ways to do it. And I think those are.
And I think a key thing is understanding that you can adopt these practices, and you should really be thoughtful on which ones you do and which ones you don't. But maybe being careful of something happens, and this is what I was concerned about with this neighbor I was talking to, was that he was sectioning himself off from large portions of the church, right? Because of either what you're doing or not doing. Like you're looking at, and it becomes this like speck in your brother's eye sort of thing, where you're just, these people are, their worship isn't very, very good. I mean, and you've talked about reform circles and complained about them, and I'm usually the one going, man, no, not so bad. But in my experience of like reform circles and reform seminary, like I've walked away going, we have to be very careful of this, because it's like we're being so just so detailed on like how worship should be, and then speaking in very critical ways sometimes, if you're not careful, about how other people do it and what is the right way to do it, and whether that's the calendar or and I think that there is a real you can bump into a real problem there.
Sure.
If you're not careful of sectioning yourself off, and it's this like new righteousness of like, I worship God the way that he's commanded me to, or the historic way, and you people don't do the historic ways. I don't know. I would just tack on to all my friends out there, like, please push toward deeper, more meaningful worship, but be very careful that you don't create for yourselves a new standard for righteousness outside of Christ in doing it.
Right. And I think that part of it is the Protestant disease, which is, I think, Catholicism became very corrupt in
Yeah.
a lot of different ways. And, obviously Luther is attempting to reform it, not leave it. And he was forced to leave it. But what happened is it happened at the time of the Enlightenment and
the invention of the printing press.
And the invention of the printing
press. A whole lot of things were changing.
And the intellect, the mind, became the primary mode. And so we kind of left the mystery and our heart and sort of the mystical part of our faith. And we really kind of cleaned it all up, and in some ways while we were cleaning it up, we lost some of the mystery.
Yeah, and we lost some of the, I guess, the way it was built out. I mean, a lot of those, so Luther and Zwingli and Calvin and all this stuff is happening around the Reformation.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden, these are the first theologians publishing books. It becomes all about the mind. Then a bunch of these people in Europe, after the upheaval that was created by that, immigrated to the United States to have religious freedom. And then in the United States, we have denominations in mass because of that.
Right.
Because of everybody wanting to express their own version. And then we exported that back out around the globe is sort of the journey. But a lot of those early Reformation churches tried to strip everything down.
Yes.
Like they would meet in plain meeting halls. They would have no instrument, no art, no decoration, no calendar, no anything. They tried to just the word. That was it, right? And that was noble in that they were trying to get away from the performance and the corruption.
Sure.
But it was, I would suggest, too far, right? That mystery and beauty and transcendence and things that people used to experience, they kind of threw that out with the bathwater. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden, Presbyterian churches started being fancy again.
They did.
And started getting choirs and fancy buildings, and they were the ones that people thought never would do that.
Right.
Yeah. And then the Pentecostals started meeting in like metal buildings just to get things done. And
there's been a lot of interesting movements in the American church.
And then the Village was planted in Tucson, Arizona.
That's right.
Met at the Muse.
At the Muse.
And then they got a little building over on Cloverland and made the mega neo-monastic house church.
That's right.
And then Mission Church did the novel thing of, I don't know.
Getting a building, having the cool exposed brick, putting up the pagan signs.
The bingo signs.
Yeah.
Not.
Let's be honest, pagan signs on the wall. Bingo is pagan, right? I mean, that's
bingo.
Pagan bingo. That's going to be the title of our podcast.
Yeah, I'm sure there have been a couple people who walked in and went, "Oh, bingo," and then they never came back.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think
and the only bingo that has been played was just for fun at a big dinner, but hey.
Yeah, but hey, but there is some elements that you have chosen, to be creative with, and the way that you've designed your building, the way you have allowed its previous architecture to be.
We didn't strip it of its history.
Yes.
Like we even have a little thing up about the old men's club that was in there, not because we're trying to promote that, but it's just interesting. This is what this building was.
Right.
Whereas I think a lot of people would try to utterly purge and never speak of that again or something. Right. And we were like, well, that's what it was. Like, and now it's a church. We think that's a cool story.
It is a cool story.
But you're right. That wouldn't have. That's different.
It is different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I threw one other little topic out. Can we give it 5 minutes?
Let's give it 5 minutes. I would love to do that.
The mundane nature of the Christian life.
The mundane nature of the Christian life. Can you explore that a little bit for me?
So I was thinking about it. So yesterday, so I've preached a couple times straight, and now I've got some weeks off. And yesterday, I was just back to like my other job is what it felt like. I sat in my office, which I rarely do, a lot of emails, a lot of thinking about wood and metal and client follow-up. And I just was like, I was thinking, this is good because this is what everybody else in my church is doing today. Mm-hmm. Generally, they just went to work. and most of them just did their thing, there, and there wasn't this profound, I had no counseling, no church meetings at all, for the day, and that's what most people are doing. And yeah, I just thought about that, and I thought, it's good. I was no less a Christian yesterday.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't know. I just thought maybe it'd be something to talk about. Just, it's not always a big day. It's not always a faith-filled day. Like, in the respect of, you don't always have those conversations, and you don't always. And how should we view that?
Well, I mean, I think, again, not to go back to the church calendar.
Oh, you found a way.
I found a way.
I thought we were moving on.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think part of what the rhythm, that is what the rhythm of the church pushes against. Not the mundaneness, but it pushes against the idea that you aren't living in a moment that is holy.
Right.
And so there's holiness to your mundane life, right?
Okay, this is what I'm getting at. Because I'm not saying it's not holy, and I'm not. Right. I probably phrased it wrong.
No, I think it's a good way of phrasing it, because that's the way we tend to feel when we experience those things. I mean, I think to be reminded of the bigger thing that we are a part of as we toil in some ways and face the thorns that push against us, the emails, the calls, the people we're trying to get a hold of that we can't get a hold of,
Yeah, the shipping rates that are astronomical.
Yes.
The meeting that goes too long. The bill that comes in too high.
Right. The secretary who's sick and her kid is sick, and all those kinds of things.
I gotta get a secretary.
Yeah.
I don't even have
so
that
they can
problem.
have
I need that problem.
a sick kid. Yeah, I don't have that problem either, but I just I'm imagining that this is part of the life. Yeah. But what happens is, you have that mundane experience, but for most people, you have the mundane experience and you have the anxieties of life pushing in on you too. So it's not.
Oh, yeah, that was there.
It's
That's
not so mundane. And in fact, I think in our world, it's become less and less mundane. I think we're just full of anxiety and distraction that we almost don't get to experience the mundane.
Yeah, I heard Russell Moore said a thing, and it was in respect to social media. But he said some of the most important times in my childhood came from boredom.
Yes.
And I thought this was really good. He just said, we don't know how to be bored, and I think this is a problem for us. And
I would agree.
Yeah. I thought, I can't remember the last time I was bored and had no idea what to do. I can't. Yeah. Outside of my sabbatical, but even that, there were plenty of things to do. I chose to take long walks. Right. It didn't feel bored.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, my challenge to people, you want to really kind of wrestle with boredom and mundane life and experience. If you don't need your cell phone, don't take it with you. Go on a date.
Right.
And you and your wife, you both don't need a cell phone. Choose one of you to have it in case, if you get the babysitter needs to get a hold of you. Choose one of you. Leave your phone at home. Yeah. Leave your phone at home anytime you can. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that you used to go home to check your messages.
Yes.
So you don't need your phone. You don't need to know what's on Facebook and the news and all those kinds of things. That will begin to force your brain to have to wrestle with things. Mm-hmm. And I know when I leave my phone at home, even when I go to work and sit in my office if my phone is home, I have a deeper peace after a little bit of distraction, of oh my gosh, where's my phone? Right. It's more peaceful.
Yeah.
So I don't know, the Christian mundane life, that's an interesting, the everyday you get up in the morning, go to work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was just, maybe that's all there was to say about it. It was just, it's kind of a mundane topic, just kind of boring.
I don't know, but here's the thing: is you did interact with people, right? At some level.
I actually quite a bit.
Yeah, so
I'm just saying it was back to where it was a Monday. There was actually plenty to do because it was stuff had stacked up over the weekend that I had chosen. I didn't address any of these emails on Sunday. Actually, not really on Saturday because I went to Bisbee and watched vintage baseball.
Nice,
which was great. And I love baseball because there's the possibility of feeling sort of bored.
Exactly,
that's what I love about baseball. But yeah, it was great. So I didn't address all this stuff. So it hit me all on Monday, which is fine.
Right.
But it just was, is the thought I had of, this is the life. This is the way faith feels for most of the people in my church.
Sure.
And I'm glad I do that too sometimes, quite a bit. But sometimes my day is punctuated by what feels like ministry moments where it's like, oh, this is kingdom work. But a lot of folks, it doesn't feel that way. It is, though.
Right.
It is.
And maybe that's the problem of the way we train people. And I will not talk about the calendar, but I will talk about the fact that when the church gathers around the table, and your church and my church both serve communion.
Yeah.
There's something, we're Protestants, but there's something powerful, God's presence there.
Right.
That we're eating the broken body, the blood poured out for us. That there's something that, no, I don't believe it's flesh. No, I don't believe it's blood. But I do believe that God's presence is there in a unique way as we gather and remember. That is something we do as followers of Jesus. And even if people who don't know Jesus come in, they look and see that. But that is the thing we do together. As we head out into our homes and our neighborhoods, we take that presence. And then when you push out to your work, even though you may be sitting there typing emails, the presence is there with you, the Spirit of God. And you are constantly on the mission of the kingdom as you write, as you engage people, as you feel the pressure of the electric bill that was too high or whatever the bill was that you get.
There was a cool thing that happened yesterday too, actually. I just remembered this. One of the phone calls where a guy, I care about a lot, who just also is in another industry job, expressed that it was nice to engage in phone calls with me. And I thought, it just meant a lot to me. It's been on my mind, honestly. I just thought that's really cool. Like, we're all in these industries like I'm in. I mean, we're like you could call us a commercial furniture builder. You have to. There's all kinds of phone calls and there's all kinds of communication, and a lot of it is you feel like somebody's mad at you or pressuring you, or it's just business,
right?
And being walking with Jesus in that, I would hope the flavor would be a little different,
right? That
and
people would find you to bring a bit of peace to their life in the midst of those things,
right, yeah, and I don't always. I mean, well, and sometimes it needs to be a bit of a do the right thing, or whatever too. Like, it's not always, Jesus doesn't always make you feel peaceful, but often.
Right. Well, even disruption leads to peace at times.
Yeah. And to actual peace.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. That was
that's interesting.
I didn't really connect the dots on that one of that being like the presence of Christ, but it was encouraging to me. I think it meant a lot to hear. I was like, oh, good. I'm glad. So, well, hey man, it's been about 42 minutes and we got a meeting coming up, don't we?
Yes, I got a meeting.
Together,
no,
somebody else.
Somebody else.
Just that good old, getting to work, be the presence of Christ out at your next meeting, Eric.
Yes, you too.
I'll do my best.
All right. Whatever.
One of the two. Enjoy.
Yep.